Welcome back to what I would affectionately call The Mess. Recently, I've spent a lot of time looking for different things to watch that are dark academia related. It's autumn time, it's the real time to get into this stuff. However, I feel like every single list you look at literally gives you the same things. And it's like, if you've been here for a while, you've watched everything and you've done everything already. There's only so many times someone can recommend you Kill Your Darling before you're going to kill yourself. You know, I love this aesthetic, but either you've already seen everything or they start recommending you like nonsense. It's like, I've seen Kill Your Darlings, Maurice, Wild, Brideshead Revisited. You know, I've seen all of them. And then they'll start like pulling out some more avant-garde options. And these ones are always a little bit boring. It's usually things like Empress Club, Riot Club. You can tell the entire story just by watching that trailer. I've never seen a worse trailer in my life. It feels like a music video with the fact that from the beginning of that trailer to the end of the trailer, you know every single plot beat that happens in that movie. What a horrible trailer. That aside, I feel like every single movie is either really badly rated or pretty popular enough that you've already watched it. So I wanted to make a list of ones that are genuinely a bit more unconventional, a bit more underground, and I feel like people who even make those underground lists are only ever talking about either, in my opinion, period dramas, which I don't think are dark academia. Those are like dark academia adjacent. These are the type of things that people who are active in the dark academia community or people in the dark academia films would watch, you know? Period dramas are not really dark academia, or they're not that unconventional. They're usually just like ones that aren't the main ones, and I'm like, yeah, okay, so you don't have Dead Poet Society on your list. That doesn't make it less popular. Either that, or even the people who use things like Legally Blonde, and I'm like, Legally Blonde is not dark academia, it's just literally just set in a university. So I've compiled my own list of unconventional dark academia films that you could watch if you are really into this aesthetic and you've already seen all of the classics. I'm going to start with one that perhaps you have seen on some lists, and that is Shirley. And so this movie is about a fictional account of a horror author called Shirley Jackson. And what happens in the film is that a couple moves into the Jackson household. The husband is a new lecturer at the university Shirley's husband works at and is played by Logan Lerman. And the movie is essentially about all of the strange happenings that follow between Shirley and the wife of the lecturer. The movie itself is incredibly unnerving. The music and the editing really puts you on edge, and the movie looks beautiful. It's very crisp, it has full color palette, and the poster really has that going for it. Elizabeth Moss is the main character. She plays Shirley, and Elizabeth Moss never gives a bad performance. You know, something about the Scientology really hits the actors in the head. They really give a good performance. Something about Scientology, they've got it in the water. It's quite an unsettling film, but it's an interesting watch nevertheless. The second one I'm going with is The Dark Maidens. I feel like dark academia is incredibly white, even though things like the model minority exists. I'm like, where is our representation in academia, huh? But this movie is called The Dark Maidens, and it is a Japanese film. It's about a literature club at a prestigious Catholic school in Japan, and they talk about both Western and Eastern literature, which is an interesting addition to movies that only ever talk about Western canon. They have a salon where they hold their club, and that salon just absolutely decorated with incredible dark academia vibes. I will say this movie is much more Western in its aesthetic because it's set in a Catholic school. The main summary of the film is that the leader of their literature club dies, and one day the club reunites after her death, and they are told to write a story about how they think she might have died. And it unfolds by each girl telling her story about how they got involved with the club and their personal confusing relationship with the leader of their club. I love a movie with this type of aesthetic. I like that it's not set in England and it's about female friendship, which is quite an interesting theme within this movie. I think it handles it in a very fascinating way. It's a little hard to get a hold of, so you're going to have to watch it on one of those K-drama websites that the K-drama girlies use, but it's also on YouTube, but in a very, very bad quality. Again, in my quest to decenter whiteness in dark academia spaces, the next movie I'm going to talk about is Selah and the Spades. This is again set in a prestigious high school where there are 5 factions that covertly operate within the school. The Spades, headed by Selah, sell drugs to the other students. Selah? I think I'm saying her name wrong. It's been a while since I've watched this movie. However, has no one to replace her once she leaves at the end of the year. So she grooms a new student to take her place called Paloma over the course of the film. Selah is intense and confusing and is not really what meets the eye. This entire movie is incredibly acted and incredibly shot. Every single time I see Gerard Jerome in a movie, I am flabbergasted. He's incredible, and I feel like he is the biggest example of how racist this industry is, because why is he not more famous? Why is he not booking roles? This film is filled to the brim with interesting relationships and a palpably tense atmosphere, and I would highly recommend watching it just because of how good it looks at the very least. The next two films might not be seen as academia films because they aren't really focusing on the normal kind of academic subjects, but The Obsessive is one of my favourite genres. And Whiplash, the first movie I want to talk about, is one of my favourite films. And it's probably the film that got me into films, so I would love to talk about it all the time anyway. So it's about Andrew, who is a jazz drummer who goes to a prestigious New York conservatory. And the movie is about his relationship with his relentlessly strict, ruthless, and violent conductor, who recruits him to be in his exclusive studio band at the conservatory. It's one of the best movies I've ever seen. It's an incredible performance by Miles Teller. It's a movie with a gut-wrenching feeling throughout, but it's one of the most immersive and impressive films that I think is ever made. Like, genuinely, not just on this list, ever. I think it's one of the best movies ever. I highly recommend watching it. The next movie is The Novice. So it's another film about an obsessive. This one is, however, set at a uni, but it is about rowing. So the main character wants to be on the rowing varsity team, but she's currently on the novice team. She doesn't really need this position, she's already got a scholarship, but she believes that pushing herself and working hard is one of the best attributes a person can have. And this entire movie is about her slowly losing herself to this madness. It's an incredibly fast-moving film. It's maximalist, like there's so much going on at one time. There's incredible sound design, and the harsh cinematography is very fitting to the subject matter, and it really keeps you engaged throughout the film. Carrying on with some films that again go against the grain, I want to talk about two opposing ideas in dark academia. So there's the idea of focusing on the dark in an academic setting and academic ideas in a dark social setting. Those both kind of interlink within all the types of dark academia media there is. And so I want to talk about some that kind of don't fall into the most classic versions of dark academia, starting with Sorority Row. It's a film about a sorority that accidentally kills their house mistress and the trouble that comes with that, and also Metropolitan, which is about a group of socialites discussing academia and the world and realizing that their social group is a little bit more horrible than one thought. Sorority Row is shot well, it looks great, it's well paced, it's got an interesting plot, and it keeps you on edge, and it's quite a tense atmosphere. Overall, I think it's a really good horror movie and would be really exciting to watch with lots of people, I think. Metropolitan, on the other hand, is about having conversations. It's slow, it's much more about relationships. Honestly, it's all about the dialogue that the film has. It's a movie that's made to applaud being quite pretentious. I think if you watch dark academia for the love of academia, for the pretentious talking at the beginning of the film where they really get into academia, this movie is for you. That's kind of what the entire movie entails. The next recommendation I want to give is not a film, but a TV show, and that is Sky Castle. It's a Korean TV show about 5 families and their kids who are being kind of groomed and pressured into going to prestigious universities. They already go to prestigious high schools, and it's about them trying to get into Seoul National University or just an overseas prestigious university. And it's an incredible portrayal of class, friendship, and family. It looks great. It's a high-end Korean TV show which is on Netflix. The acting is incredible, and it's about dark secrets being revealed and really all about academia and pushing kids to be the best that they can. And a big theme I think is really important in dark academia is keeping up appearances, which I think Sky Castle has an abundance of. It's a pretty gripping show. I feel like each episode has a really good beginning and a really good ending. There are some filler episodes, but each one has such a cliffhanger that it keeps going. The next movie is The Souvenir. This is about a film school student and her relationship with an older man who works at the British Foreign Office. It's interesting to see a different kind of academia. Obviously, this one isn't about humanities. Like, the acting in this is really nice, but the main thing is it's incredible to look at. It's such a beautifully shot film. It's this really airy quality to this film that makes it both really peaceful but also very tense. I think this movie is quite nail-biting in how terse It is. It's scarily interesting too, considering how basic the premise of the actual film is, and it's very engaging for such a slow moving film. Each plot point kind of hums slowly. There's also a sequel to this movie, which I have not seen yet, but if you like this movie, you'll probably like that one too. I also want to say both the first and second one won Sight and Sound's best movie of that year, so I think that's got to say something. And the last movie I want to recommend is Bad Genius. So this is about a cheating scandal at a prestigious school in Thailand. It's a heist movie and it's paced and edited with God's hands. There's absolutely no screwing around. It's an incredibly tightly wound and well-structured film. It's super entertaining. It's not very traditionally dark academia-y, but it is very good and I highly recommend. It's an entertaining 2 hours. So those are my recommendations. I feel like they are very outside of the box. Perhaps they're a little bit too outside of dark academia for some people. I think a lot of people really get into it because of the aesthetics, and this really isn't about the aesthetics and much more about the themes that these movies kind of talk about. And all of these films I think are actually like incredible films, and not simply films that have dark academia vibes to them. I really just like the list that kind of just put anything that looks vaguely dark academia-y. These movies are actually really good and I highly recommend watching them all because they're all good films in their own right. Hopefully some of you actually watch some of these because I think they're actually very good, and I feel like I've compiled a very thorough list here.